Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 247 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. Now, in this episode, I'm going to talk about ways to listen better at work. We all know that listening is an important skill, but there's a lot of reasons why we don't always do it as well as we could. And we'll talk in this episode about why listening is so important and some practical ideas to help you listen better, to basically build better relationships in your team and your workplace. Okay, let's get into the episode right now. So we all know that good communication skills are important for leaders, and too often we focus on the outgoing part of communication, the speaking or the writing. But the incoming part of communication is possibly even more important, which includes listening. So in this episode, I'm going to take a look at some simple and practical ways to listen better at work so you can build better relationships and support your team. So good communication is a two-way process, but it all starts with listening. Listening provides you with understanding. Understanding is a key foundation for good leadership. When you understand where people are coming from, you'll be able to adapt to better suit the situation. Now, when people talk and we don't listen, we lose that understanding. This means we are at risk of taking action which is at odds with what people are telling us. This in turn means that we might lose credibility as we are perceived as failing to take into account the needs of others, and over time, we may lose trust or be seen as a self-absorbed leader who is only interested in our own goals. Now, unfortunately, listening is not as easy as it sounds. There are many workplace distractions that can derail us in addition to the self-talk in our own heads. Now, from a practical perspective, listening helps you understand what your people need and what actions to take. But on top of that is the trust-building aspect where listening helps to show that you care about the people around you enough to listen. So it may seem as if better listening starts by focusing on the speaker. As with many aspects of leadership, I believe it's actually important to start with yourself first. Taking note of your own personal tendencies when it comes to listening is quite important, and these will help you to identify your potential limitations and, of course, your strengths. So how do we do this? Well, one starting point I find useful are the characteristics which underpin the common DISC psychometric assessment. Now, this is a common one that's been around for a long time, and I just use it as a broad categorization to help us think about the different styles that are out there. So DISC is divided into 4 quadrants with 2 axes, and the axes are based on a range of characteristics from task-focused to people-focused people and introverted to extroverted people. Now, you can see them illustrated on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/247. I'll put the diagram there. And I've also put some potential tendencies that I've included within each quadrant. Now, to use this, you'd simply plot where you think you are on the 2 different axes, which should land you in one of the quadrants. And yes, it's very possible and common to be somewhere in the middle, but we're keeping it simple and we're just using the 4 quadrants. Now, once again, these types of models are simply a guide. Use them as a starting point and always question them to see whether they are true for you. After all, everyone is different and made up of many different factors within their own personal iceberg. And I do talk about the iceberg a lot, but I'll link to the relevant article in the show notes page as well, so you can check that out if you haven't heard me talk about that already. Now, even though all these different personality models are not perfectly accurate, I do find them useful to help people gain a perspective of some of the different styles or types of people they might find out in the world. So let's take a quick look at some of the characteristics of each of the quadrants in that little model. Now, the top left is often known as direct or dominance. Now, in this category, listeners are likely to appreciate direct communication. They don't want too much waffling and would like people to get straight to the point. At the top right is influence. These listeners are likely to enjoy fun stories and being entertained and are more likely to struggle when it comes to boring or slower-paced conversations. Now, moving to the bottom left is the conscientious quadrant. Here, listeners are likely to be interested in detail and sticking to the facts and logic, rather than worrying too much about emotions. Now on the bottom right comes the steadiness quadrant. These listeners are supportive, like to help and provide a stable, calm environment. Now these simple groupings can provide insight on a few things. Firstly, they tell us a little bit about our focus areas. These are likely to be the topics, content, or other aspects of the conversation that might pique our interests. We may tend to pay more attention to these parts while ignoring or missing others. And this model can also help us to identify our potential listening shortcomings. Extroverts, for example, may be more engaging and social, but they may focus more on getting their point across than on the actual listening part. Now, introverts can be stereotypically good listeners, but they may actually be susceptible to being stuck in their own heads, listening to their own self-talk. So we've started off with that simple DISC model to help you identify your own listening characteristics, and hopefully you can see little tips in that model which might give you an idea of where your focus areas might be. But now let's get to the simple tips to hopefully help you improve your listening skills. Now the first one to think about is to listen better by removing distractions. Now potential distractions are all around us in the workplace, which makes listening a big challenge. Being a human makes it a challenge too, with the average attention span being reported at roughly 8 seconds. Now, because of this, we need to cut down our potential distractions as much as we can. So you can start by putting your devices on Do Not Disturb or silent mode or turning off notifications. Nothing screams "I'm not interested" as much as looking at your phone when someone is talking to you. So close the laptop, put the phone face down, and yes, even mute your smartwatch if you have one. This will give you the best chance at actually listening. And it also sends a strong message that you are providing your undivided attention. I find it a very powerful signal when you turn your phone face down and look at someone. It shows them that my phone's not important right now. I'm going to listen to you with my full attention. Now use your environment to your advantage too. Where possible, position yourself where you can't see people moving around, and this will help you to remain focused on the speaker. So for example, when I'm coaching in person at someone's workplace, I'm often in a meeting room with a few big glass walls. I'll always sit with my back to the glass walls where possible, and this means less stuff moving in and out of my eye line, meaning I'm distracted less often and I can maintain my full attention. The second thing to focus on is to listen better by making the time for it. When someone needs to speak to you, make sure you actually have time to listen. If you're just about to run to another meeting, you won't be in a great headspace to listen. You'll be wanting the conversation to wrap up as soon as possible. So there's a few ways to handle this. Firstly, you can let the person know how much time you have so they know what to expect. Or you could ask to defer the conversation to when you have more time to pay proper attention. You could also cancel your commitments if you know the conversation is going to be an important one. Now, the point I'm making here is try not to cram in your listening to a space which is too small for it. You'll come off seeming rushed, inconsiderate, and potentially disrespectful. The third thing to keep in mind when you're trying to listen better is to remember that it's not about you. Listening in leadership is not really about you. Yes, you are listening to understand more about a person or a situation, but you are doing this ideally so that you can provide greater support or assistance. People have a tendency to relate what they are hearing to their own personal experiences. And when someone tells you about their car accident, we start to think of that time when we also had an accident. And then, if we aren't careful, we've changed the conversation to be about how we handled our car accident 5 years ago. Now, this unfortunately makes us look quite self-absorbed. And talking about ourselves feels good, and I'll put a link to some research about that. But unfortunately, it's taking the focus from the important act of listening. Now, another thing that I've noticed with myself and others is that we are all full of advice. When someone has a problem, we can think of a solution for it. Now, why is it so easy and attractive to come up with solutions for other people's problems? Well, it's because we have no accountability or attachment to them, so we don't need to live with the consequences. Now, it feels helpful and supportive to give someone the answer, but in reality, sometimes the answer doesn't really help them. Providing answers to people reduces their own accountability for the solution, and it also assumes that we know their situation better than they do. Now, in coaching, I tend not to give advice at all. Instead, I help people think differently about their situation by asking a lot of questions. Now, I save all my advice for when I write articles and publish podcasts like this, so I can get it out of my system, which is what I'm doing right now. So you can do the same, because a big part of active listening is asking questions to clarify your understanding of what's being said and to help people elaborate on their chosen topic. Now, one way to prevent falling into the solution trap is to simply ask the question, what would you like from me during this conversation? They might just want someone to listen, to act as a sounding board, or to give your opinion on what they say. And yes, they might want you to give them some advice. But at least if you ask, you'll know what they'd like from you, and you don't need to guess. And on that note, if you think I can help you by having a coaching conversation, get in touch and apply for a coaching session with me on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/247. Okay, and the last tip I have for you is to listen better by monitoring your own listening habits. Reflection is a very useful tool, so why not reflect on your own listening habits? Some aspects of listening to reflect on are instances when you attempted to jump in with your own solution or story, or maybe times when you felt bored or impatient, or it could be your own self-talk while the other person was speaking, or maybe distractions that took your focus away from the speaker. Now, of course, in the moment, these things can be tough to monitor, but that's what reflection is for. If you'd like to improve your listening, spend a few minutes taking note of how you listened, and this will hopefully provide you with insights about your own listening habits so you can improve them for next time. Now, communication is only becoming more challenging in my opinion. Increasing work pressures, distributed workforces, new technologies, and time-poor people means more distractions, with more frazzled people struggling to pay attention. So let's not forget that good listening sends a powerful message to your team that you're interested in what they have to say, and sometimes that's enough to make people feel like they matter and to want to come to work each day. So I'd love to get your tips on better listening. You can leave them on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/247. Let me and all the thoughtful leaders know your tips. And while you're at it, if you have a minute to spare, please leave a positive review on your podcast app of choice if you like this podcast or this episode. I really appreciate it. It helps me get the word out about Thoughtful Leader. Okay, thank you for listening once again. Keep up the listening with your team, and I'll be back next week.